Wow, we are back. We are back. Welcome, everyone, to the Psychedelic Passage podcast. My name is Jimmy Nguyen, and I am your host here. It's actually been quite a few weeks since I've recorded an episode. I know with the magic of podcast post production, you all just connected with me a couple of weeks ago, but we preload sometimes and record some episodes up ahead, and there's been a lot of shifts and changes for me. So it's so great to be here with you all, for first and foremost. And I think the last episode, you all heard a little bit about my personal psilocybin journey and just some takeaways with that. Since then, I have actually put all of my belongings in storage and moved into my travel trailer full time. So myself and my 17-year-old cat Nugget hit the road, and I find myself here in beautiful Asheville, North Carolina. So for those of you who might hear the trees and the birds in the background, a little bit of wind in the trees, or for those who are joining us on video, we post these podcasts on YouTube. So I highly recommend, if you all want to see my face and see my surroundings and see where I'm at, to pop over to our YouTube channel and give us some love. That's Psychedelic Passage. All of our socials and all of that are Psychedelic Passage. You'll see that I am just literally sitting in the woods here. I have my Wi-Fi hotspot. I grabbed some things to put together a little bit of like a renegade podcast setup, and here I am recording with you all. So I'm so excited to be here. Yeah, maybe I'll just offer us to share in a little bit of space and time and breath together. It's a real honor for me to have this format, to connect with you all, to be able to share any parting of knowledge, and also to feel like I am building and contributing to some sense of community in the intentional psychedelic space. And one of the best ways to be in presence with each other is also to share some breath together. So love to just take a couple of moments and just breathe. So if you're open to that, if you're driving and whatnot, you can obviously keep your eyes open and peeled. But yeah, just invite you to just settle in wherever you're at. Just thinking about your hands and your feet, thinking about your body and where it's positioned, and just take those deep belly breaths. Let's just focus on our breath and nothing but our breath for a couple of moments, just focusing on that sensation of that air traveling past our nose and our mouth, and imagining that inhale coming through our lungs and then traveling through our entire body. And then just those big exhales as well. Just maybe perhaps each breath, or just deepening your breath a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more. And so let's just share it in a couple of breaths together, and then we'll dive into this episode here today. I'm imagining that breath coming all the way in through my body, all the way down to my feet, circling all the way down to the center of the earth, coming back up, 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 up through my feet, up into my body, up through every cell, and back up through my lungs. Maybe let's just take one more together. Thanks for being here. Thanks for listening. We have gotten just so much great positive feedback on this podcast, and it really just started with us here at Psychedelic Passage wanting some avenue and some outlet to be able to speak and connect and be creative, and it's turned into something quite cool, honestly. So I'm really looking forward to refreshing some content for you all. We'll be looking back over and like re-recording a couple of thoughts, and also like adding new content and new episodes. So today will be a part of a series of episodes that I think we'll sprinkle out sporadically over time, but this is going to be our like return to just some of the foundational elements of intentional psychedelic work. Obviously, as many of you know, there's some core foundations to intentional psychedelic work that should just be like non-negotiables in this. People know about like set and setting. People know about the importance of integration, which we'll dive into. People know about having a great facilitator and supporter. And then there's preparation. So what we'll be doing is we'll be breaking down preparation into a couple of different subcategories, actually. I think that would be helpful. And so today what I'd like to focus on is focusing on tuning into our bodies and having the skill set of how to do that as a way of preparing for a psychedelic experience. And so just to preface this a little bit, I'll share that when I talk to folks about psychedelic experiences and intentional psychedelic work, I think people often find themselves so surprised at how much psychedelics involve the body. And so today I want to talk about preparation as it relates to the body and some things that may be helpful for you as you are potentially exploring an intentional psychedelic experience. Hopefully, it's through our network and one of our wonderful facilitators. But even if it's solo or in a recreational setting, I think all of this will be helpful and will apply for you as well. So there's some conversation and some language about how psychedelics can have this like somatic process. We've certainly done some episodes in the past about trauma releasing and somatics and psychedelic work. And, certainly there's a wide body of conversation that can happen here. And I think in just the public culture and in the public sphere, as people think about psychedelics, most people are thinking about the mind and I think the soul. I think most people are thinking about like emotions and the hallucinogenic part, the trippy part, which we like regard to our mind and to our brain. And though there is quite a neural process going on there, a lot of that is fueled in the body. For example, I don't know how many people know this, but like 90% of the serotonin that your brain uses is actually formed in the gut. And there's actually some good evidence of, the gut brain axis and a healthy microbiome of your stomach that actually can contribute to antidepressant or to alleviating symptomatic things as it relates to poor mental health, whether that's with a formally diagnosed mental health condition or not, just as an example. And so, what I want to do today is just build a little bit of a primer as a part of this preparation for intentional psychedelic healing series. And this one is going to be about a little bit of a primer on the context of putting myself in the shoes of somebody who is preparing for a psychedelic experience. And then I hope that through that, I'll be able to give a little bit of just advice or suggestions or things, practices that people can do. When I think about the preparation process at large, I really equate this to like practice rounds. Yes, there's this thing of like, you know, trying to work through and identify as much stuff as possible, setting intentions, trying to pre-identify traumas, making sure that in the preparation process that you and your facilitator have as much of a baseline of connection and information and knowledge sharing as possible. But I also actually think that there are some like hidden nuances within, preparation. And so, a lot of folks are like, well, how do I prepare for something that I don't know like what it's going to be like or what it's going to look like? And so I use this analogy of practice rounds. What you're really doing in preparation is giving yourself the opportunity to like do some drills, do some practice sequences to identify where your game is great and identify where some of your game is not so good. I'm thinking about basketball players who go and shoot 1,000 free throws before a game, as an example. And so what these practice rounds do is they allow us to have a really low stakes foray into things that will likely be helpful in navigating a psychedelic experience. So remember, this isn't just about the content, which the content in a therapeutic context can involve your, mental cognition and history, your emotional home and body and history, trauma history, obviously, setting your intentions and some of those things. And I kind of regard that as like the meat or like the contents of the psychedelic experience, but all of that content needs to sit in something. It needs to be housed in something. It needs to sit in some type of like a container. And so preparation, what that does is it allows you to build a good container for some of that stuff so that you can bring it with you into a psychedelic experience for it to unfold however it needs to unfold. One of the elements of that container is the physical body. And so I'll just share a little bit of first and foremost what I think is the most important, which is realizing that we are pretty out of touch and out of tune with our body as an average American in the United States. I think that there are some folks who have like hypersensitivity to things, and there are folks who have certainly honed in a presence of their body. But we just generally live in a society where we primarily live in our minds, we live in our brains, like sedentary work, sitting at an office all day, sitting behind a screen all day, scrolling on your phone all day, consuming information in the news or like whatever. Like you can just see how, whereas before, for much of American society, we had been relying on manual labor and manual work and physical processes to make a living and earn and get paid. Nowadays, it's really related to what our brains can offer, what our cognitive functioning can offer, what our problem solving skills can offer, which can actually disconnect us from our body. I'll also say that people who do manual labor, a lot of respect to day laborers, general contractors, people who work at factories, people who work at Amazon, like all of that, those folks actually can be pretty disconnected from their bodies too. They may be using their bodies, but when you're in a process of, working in a consumerist capitalist society, like one of the ways of coping and functioning is how do we disassociate? How do we check out from all of this? So one of the core tenets of preparation is how do we bring all this stuff back online? Like, how do we come into connection with all of these things, our brain, our emotions, our spirit, our body, so that we could like wake up a little bit, right? And so I really want folks to like think about that for a moment in whatever context that makes sense for you. If any of that resonates with you, what I will share is that you don't have to do psychedelics to move through a process like that. However, intentional psychedelic work can be super helpful in this as well. So I shared earlier that I packed up all my stuff, moved into my RV trailer, drove across the country, and in that process, had to move and had to, all of that. And it's pretty interesting. So once I got here, I'll just share a little bit of a story and why this makes sense in the context of our conversation around psychedelics and the body as it relates to preparation. Is that I got here and I knew that my body was like pretty tired from the car and a long road trip and shifting from living in a trailer and things like that. And then it was pretty fascinating. My partner lives here in Asheville, and so here's what happens. So I then have been transitioned from a place where I am normally like up to my own devices. I just do my own thing. I was in Denver, Colorado. I work, I do my own thing. There's not a lot of people who are like observing my habits, patterns, choices, body, all of that, right? So that's the first piece of advice that I share is that observation is a real big key here. I think the ability to tune out and observe what's going on in your body can actually be a natural antidote to this dissociative state that most people find themselves in as it relates to their relationship with their body. So I showed up here and my partner's like, have you always wheezed like that? I'm like, "What are you talking about? I'm breathing normally and totally fine." She's like, "No, just breathe and just listen." And as I was breathing, I noticed that on my exhales, I have a little like whistle. It kind of like wheezes a little. And then this continued on further. I then started to try to breathe through my nose, and I was like, huh, that's interesting that my nose is like 60% blocked most of the time. And so what I'll share is that like by having somebody just observe, it kind of sparked a little bit of observation in myself. And then this process continued on and on and on. I was then out to dinner and we were walking around afterwards, and my partner's like, "Have you always limped like that?" And then I shared with her that I grew up in the south side of Chicago, and a part of it is you develop a limp to make sure that, people don't mess with you, that don't need to mess with you, and it's definitely a part of, like, south side Chicago culture. And she's like, "Oh, okay, like, that's cool." But then I noticed, I was like, "Oh, I'm limping. Like, how long have I been limping?" And then I discovered that I'm having pain in my ankle. And I was like, "How long has that been?" I'm actually looking at this and I'm like, "Oh my goodness. I've actually been dealing with this low key chronic pain in my ankle probably for about the past 6 months." And it wasn't this big sprain, it wasn't an event that happened, like, I didn't roll my ankle, I didn't pop it or anything, but I was, like, feeling into my ankle, I was like, "Oh, this thing hurts." And then I looked down at my feet and I'm like, "Oh, the orientation of my foot is actually a little bit more extended out." Probably in a way for me to compensate. I was like, "Oh, if I really feel into it, I'm actually feeling that my stabilizing muscles are overcompensating. Oh, if I travel up a little further, I actually notice that this is straining my knee a little bit. Oh, if I think about that further, I'm realizing that this is throwing off the adjustment to my hip." And so what I want to share here, this analogy, I hope that that was an exciting story for folks to hear about all of the ailments of me effectively getting old. But one little bit of observation and awareness can start to open the door for you. And I think that this can apply to the mind. This can apply to your emotional home and body. I think that this can apply to your spirit and your soul, but particularly to your body, like your physical body. And so the analogy that I want to draw here is that if we are in a society that encourages us to be disconnected from our bodies, and then we also have a society where we are taking in stimuli as a way to cope and as a way to engage with the world, and then if we are also disconnected with our bodies as a way to cope, or maybe we're just too busy or don't have the ability or the skill set that needs to be honed over time to pay attention, then imagine what's going to happen when you take a dose of psilocybin and your awareness expands to the point where you are hyper noticing everything. I've had people in the past remark that they had, a psilocybin experience, and I'm their facilitator. They're like, somehow my whole brain is lighting up. Somehow I'm so aware of my feelings and your feelings and all of these little nuances in my body. And so what I share is that that can be a really, really beautiful and positive thing, which also is a little bit liminal. It fades. So just remember that this like expanded awareness is something that should be honed over time as a part of a good integration process. But imagine that if you were in that expanded awareness, I think that that can be really amazing for some people, and I actually think that that can be really overwhelming and traumatizing for some people as well. Because we are coping mechanisms. We are like meat sacks that walk around that are on these chemical timers, and we just like cope and figure out like what we need to do. So usually what I'm finding is that I have great coping mechanisms, whether that's doom scrolling on Instagram or getting involved in work or having a conversation with somebody or whatnot. And there have been all of these ways that I have low key ignored the dynamics and the processes that are happening in my body. So this can be applied, I'm talking about like muscular skeletal stuff like within my ankle and knee and like whatever. but this can also apply to where you hold stress in your body. This can apply to areas of your body that are generally actually like pretty tight and wound up, or other areas of your body that are not so much so. This can apply to areas where you may have some just like chronic thing going on, that may be an indicator of probably a more physical related issue that probably needs a little context. Maybe you go get checked out, or by a doctor or something like that. But just think about this for a moment, that if we are that disconnected and have ways of coping, then it doesn't set us up quite well for psychedelic experiences that are supposed to really tune us into our awareness, that can be really, really overwhelming. Like, imagine if you were used to watching your TV from a certain distance, and then you zoomed in, and then you were watching your TV from like 6 inches away. It would be hard to watch whatever it is that you're watching, and whatever you're focusing on will probably come up in some type of a distorted way. And so there's a possibility for folks to hone these skills, however. And this is actually one of the things of like my like body of work, which I've been kind of regarding around these things that I call like universal skills. So the theory behind this for me is that the same skills that help you to navigate a meaningful psychedelic experience are the same skills that help you to navigate a meaningful life experience, because the psychedelic experience is a microcosm of the life experience, with life being one big hallucinatory experience as well, right? So if you can work on these things in the context of a psychedelic container, then it actually allows you to work on these things in the context of your life container. Does that make sense? So like, if I'm talking about bringing more awareness to minute, small nuances in your body, then that can also be applied to not only your body, but your relationships with your personal self, with the mental narratives that run through your mind. If I say that one of the ways of honing into the skill is to find time for you to sit with as little to no stimuli as possible, and then to really actually tune into what's going on in your body, this observational tool, which I'm recommending for people to do, then you can also see how that can help you to navigate a psychedelic experience. And then that can also probably be a pretty useful tool in normal life. If I'm sharing about like how do we draw awareness to things pre-judgment, without judgment, before we assign narratives and labels and stories, as an example, that then also is a universal skill. So that helps us to navigate a psychedelic experience, but then also helps us to navigate a life experience, or the experience of life in a meaningful way. And so my main takeaways here is that we are pretty disconnected from our bodies. Our bodies are probably a pretty good map to tell us that there's stuff and things like going on. Like, generally we like carry our bodies in certain ways of coping, and in certain ways of overcompensating for things. Like, I have a lot of stuff on my left side, right? That to me then throws off my posture, my balance, my footing, which then leads into other areas and other things. So by being in tune to the wheezing in my lungs, it actually allowed me to be in tune to what's going on in my ear, nose, and throat, and my ankle, which then allowed me to think about my whole posture, and then that then traveled up to my shoulders, and so on and so forth. So like, this like mapping process, I think, can be really helpful. And the way to start to do that is to put yourself in areas where you are just tuning into your body. So like, this doesn't have to be meditation. This doesn't have to be like quietude, but find yourself and put yourself in areas where you are lowering stimuli. If you wanted to go like really far, you could get yourself into like a sensory deprivation tank, or, something like that. But even a place where you're just like closing your eyes, finding some quietude. You can try this sometimes laying down, but you can sit up as well. Or you can find some time and place where you're just like walking around, but it's like mindful observation of your body, just to see what that looks and feels like. And then you just start to note things. You're like, oh, there's this little thing that I notice. Oh, there's this little tick that I do. For me, I rub my face and I do it so unconsciously. I'm like, oh, there's something interesting there. Oh, I have a restless leg thing. And that actually kicks up when my ADHD symptoms are actually firing off. So I think that this tool of observation, first and foremost, is a really, really great place to start. And what I will share with folks is this is going to be really uncomfortable, likely for most folks, because usually there's always an exit. Usually there's always some type of a way for us to not do this, whether we consume something or watch something or listen to music or get back into work or get into our emotional addictions. Like there's so many different ways for us to cope and disconnect from our bodies than we realize, right? So this is going to take time. And I think that if you were able to really hone into the skill of being really quiet with you and just your body to start there, you're going to make a lot of massive steps in being like a little bit more prepared and a little bit more like honed in and ready for a psychedelic experience. Just to even name what's going on in your body can go a long way, because when you're actually in it, when you've eaten 4 grams of mushrooms, you want to have practiced this a little bit, because it will be hard to find words sometimes. It will be hard to articulate this sometimes. It will be hard. And one of the interesting things that I find about psychedelic experiences, especially with psilocybin, is it kind of becomes this like magnifying glass. Like it sometimes like shines a light on these different areas of our body and our things that like need some attention. Whether we do something about it in the psychedelic experience or not is a little bit irrelevant. Most of it we're going to take with us into the integration process, because the beautiful thing is that though these psychedelic experiences can be quite hallucinogenic and quite strong and all of that, we return, we come back, right? And so that's one piece of advice that I would give to folks is that like observation. And then I think you could start to stack up different, things here with this. So like, can you get into a practice where you are really like moving your body, or here's another one. Do you have a practice where you have a good way of releasing energy in your body? If you're asking me what does that even mean, then this is an area that I really encourage you to work on, or work with your facilitator on. How do we discharge energy in a meaningful way that is not disruptive to our bodies, right? And there's a lot of different philosophies with that. Folks can do like throat vocalization stuff. This can be physical stuff like a punching bag, or like, certain like stress, resilience and pressure, like, like exercises. This can be, somatic work. This can be ecstatic dance, or body work and manipulation, with like with professional like body worker. There's like all different types of ways, but I think that people get so focused on the emotions and the mental health aspect of all of this, and though yes, that's very important, all of this houses in the container of the body. Like all of it, all of it, all of it, all of it. And so I really invite folks that if you're feeling stuck in any type of way in your preparation process, or you're like, this is just a little too like conceptual for me, and I just want like a more like, if you're looking for a more tactile way of getting started here, then I really, really encourage that you can start through access points and processes in the body. I think from there, you can then start to build a good plan with your facilitator. So let's say you think in your body that you actually don't put enough like strenuous, good stress things on your body. Like you don't get around and move around as much, or you live a really sedentary life, or generally your body's like pretty soft. So it's like, okay, there's probably exercises and things that you can do that add an element of like hardening, that add an element of like, pressure and force to your body. Or you may find yourself in an environment where you work really hard, manual labor, contract labor, and you're pushing your body too much. Okay, then that's an indication on finding ways to soften into your body. You see? So like a little bit of this is like a choose your own adventure, but the other key is to be observed in this process, to talk about this openly, to document have people in life observe you, and also have your facilitator observe you through this process too. How you carry yourself, your gait, your daily posture. Noticing that if you find yourself in certain emotional states or mental states, that there is likely some sort of a posture or something that carries with it. All of this may not make direct correlation to a psychedelic experience, but I promise you that if you worked on these things in your body, you will build a great foundation for being able to navigate any psychedelic experience. The ecstatic, the challenging, the difficult, the grief, the beautiful ones. And that's the goal. That's the goal here. So I'm gonna wrap up this episode here. Thank you so much for being here with me. I'm looking forward to diving in more. This episode being a series of preparation discussions as it relates for intentional psychedelic experiences. Thank you for joining us. That wraps up our episode here. You can find our episodes anywhere that you get podcasts. You can find us on Spotify and Apple Music. We also upload these episodes to our YouTube. And before we go, I'm just going to take some time to read a review from a console call that one of our call takers took. They're talking about Michelle. Say Michelle was awesome. I recognized her from the podcast. She was very empathetic and answered my question in a clear and accessible manner. I felt comfortable opening up to her about my struggles and truly felt she had my best interests in mind. So that's awesome. I'm really, really grateful to be able to share that. And psychedelic work is a foundation in human connection, first and foremost. Do not forget that. So we here at Psychedelic Passage have a team of people who are ready to be in support of you, to hear you out, to help you to find the right service, psychedelic related service that's right for you. So thank you so much for joining me, and I look forward to connecting with you all next time. Thanks.